All right, so what's the case to all these fired up Bernie Sanders supporters, some of them in this room today, fired up Elizabeth Warren supporters, big rallies that he had? What do you say to them?
First of all, Elizabeth Warren, I think, had the best bio of anybody that's run for president in my lifetime. And she had the best critique that corruption was killing the country. I don't know why, but she decided to chase Bernie Sanders. I have no idea, but that was the decision that they made. Some people in this country want a revolution. They want disruption. I don't know what, they scream at people. They go and bully people. And I don't know how you win an election. That's 78 years old, standing up screaming in a microphone about the revolution. But you got to give people an alternative. You got to give people an alternative. Yeah. And these people are perfectly happy to beat Jeremy Corbyn. They were all campaigning for him. They were taking pictures and everything. I mean, good God, we got to do something here, people.
So over the past few weeks on this channel, we've been covering how Bernie Sanders is undeniably surging in the 2020 Democratic Party primaries, but also how the neoliberal media and how elite voices inside the Democratic Party establishment are losing their goddamn minds because they can't handle this fact. They can't handle the fact that Bernie is surging, that Bernie is now the front runner for the nomination, and that tens of millions of people inside and beyond the Democratic Party see Bernie Sanders and his policies and his philosophy as the best path forward for the United States of America. And so people like James Carville, a generations-long Democratic Party elite strategist and pundit, have been going all over mainstream media to warn people about Bernie, to say that Bernie can't win, to say that Bernie is too radical, to say that Bernie Sanders is too impractical, to say that Bernie Sanders can't reach out to African Americans, to say that Bernie Sanders doesn't understand the practical needs of African Americans and of regular working class people, and to basically say that he's just talking about revolution and yelling into a microphone and screaming into a microphone, and he's not actually offering a practical alternative to what Donald Trump is, and therefore people won't respect him as an alternative. And all of that is a lie. James Carville can't actually address why Bernie Sanders is popular and why Bernie Sanders is a credible threat to win the nomination and defeat Donald Trump, so he just makes stuff up. We've noted a lot of this on the channel. To suggest that Bernie Sanders can't win is 100% a lie. Bernie Sanders may not win. Nothing is guaranteed in politics. But Bernie Sanders is among the best positioned to defeat Donald Trump when you look at all sorts of polling metrics. When you look at Donald Trump versus Bernie polling, or you look at Joe Biden versus Donald Trump polling, you see that Bernie Sanders is among the best poised, more than most of the Democratic Party candidates, including some of the neoliberal picks like Klobuchar and Buttigieg. Bernie Sanders is in a good position to defeat Trump. So to say that he can't win as an argument against his policies is 100% incorrect. In many ways, Bernie Sanders would win because of his policies. Because Bernie Sanders speaks to people who have often been disengaged from the political process, have been disillusioned from politics, have been sort of disenfranchised formally or informally from politics, have been excluded from the discourse from Republican and Democratic Party elites for far too long now. And it's not surprising to know that Bernie Sanders is the very sort of candidate to bring out young people and African Americans and other marginalized people to the polls in record numbers to defeat Donald Trump. James Carville does not address that because those facts are not convenient for him in any sort of significant way. But beyond that, we have to talk about the fact that he suggests Bernie Sanders isn't presenting an alternative. That might be the most egregious thing said in this particular clip, because whether you like Bernie or not, whether you agree with him or not, and of course we know James Carville, much of the Democratic Party elite, and much of the neoliberal media do not like Bernie Sanders, to say that he isn't suggesting an alternative is a lie. Bernie Sanders has been offering an alternative to the Democratic Party elite and to the Republican Party for generations. Even before he ever considered a run for president, Bernie Sanders' entire political career has been about providing alternatives on economic issues, on social issues, on cultural issues. Bernie Sanders has always been offering that alternative. offering that alternative by suggesting that single-payer healthcare is the only way forward, offering that alternative by suggesting that workers and not corporations need to be the base of the Democratic Party, and that workers and not corporations and not international conglomerates need to be the focus whenever things like trade deal and labor policy are discussed. He's always been offering an alternative when he's defended the rights of marginalized people, even when it was unpopular politically to do so. He did not need to evolve on LGBTQ rights. Bernie Sanders was right on that issue before the mainstream Democrats ever were, providing an alternative to people that were left out of the discourse of Republican and Democratic Party elites. Bernie Sanders has always been offering that. And in this interview, Carville seems to suggest, and he suggested it earlier today on MSNBC as well, that Bernie Sanders doesn't speak to African Americans and he doesn't speak to regular people outside of the big city activist bubbles because he's talking about democratic socialism and he's talking about revolution and he's not talking about hard-nosed policies. But that's not true. Bernie Sanders certainly does talk about his socialist vision. He certainly does talk about the need for a political revolution. He certainly does talk about the need to be angry sometimes, to yell and scream into a microphone. Because if you look at what American society is right now, and you're not ready to yell or scream a little bit, then you're either not human or you're benefiting from the status quo and you don't want to bring attention to it. That's the simple reality. Bernie Sanders has done all those things, but to say that that isn't connected to his core policies around free education, Medicare for all, making it easier for workers to join a union, building a $15 federal minimum wage, addressing things like housing, addressing things like income and wealth inequality, addressing things like migrant rights, the rights of minorities broadly defined. Bernie Sanders has been offering a core alternative everywhere, all the time, strictly based in policy and a broader vision for society. When you look at Bernie's people, they are there with Bernie, not just because they love Bernie, and there's a lot to love about Bernie Sanders and the man he is, but because he has the right ideas to make America, and indeed the world, a better place. Bernie's got the alternatives on all those issues. Many more I can't even list. The Green New Deal is a functional alternative to the status quo. Bernie Sanders has gone to regular working class people, white, black, Latino, Asian, Native American, all sorts of backgrounds, and suggested to them that his program will functionally, in a way you can quantify mathematically and, qualitatively, build a better life for you and your children and your community. That's what Bernie Sanders has committed to. To suggest that that's all theoretics, that's all ivory tower rambling, that's just a guy yelling into a microphone, is the most egregious lie about Bernie Sanders we might have heard this entire campaign. So at the end of the day, oppose Bernie Sanders. Feel free to. You have that right. You have the right to say, I don't want Bernie Sanders to win. You have the right to say, I don't think he's the best option. You have the right to say, I think this person or these people are better than Bernie Sanders. But don't lie about why that's the case. Make your choice and your rationale clear. Say you oppose Bernie Sanders, not because he's too radical or he's too impractical, but because his pragmatic policies strike at your social and political and economic privilege and power, and you're scared of him. Tell people that honestly. Be honest with the American people, James Carville. Be honest with the African American people you pretend to speak for, James Carville, and say, I fear Bernie Sanders because the party's going to be over for me and the other Republican and Democratic Party elites when his vision is beginning to be implemented.